It's absolutely true that there is a kind of coterie of corrupt oligarchs who have this parasitic relationship with the Russian state that have grown very, very, very rich and support Putin's monstrous regime in doing so. But at the same time, sanctions are not imposed by courts, right? Sanctions are imposed by politicians ultimately. This isn't the Serious Fraud Office or the National Crime Agency or even the intelligence agencies trying to build a case that is ultimately put before a jury and a judge. This is what a government says someone has done wrong.
A business associate of Roman Abramovich has failed in an attempt to overturn British sanctions against him. He's a man called Eugene Shivler, a joint Anglo-American citizen who grew up in Moscow and was sanctioned after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He took his challenge to the UK Supreme Court. Judges backed the government in a 4-1 judgment against him. So what is happening to the foreign money that once saw London branded Londongrad? Tom Burgis is an investigative journalist and the author of Kleptopia, How Dirty Money is Conquering the World. Tom, good afternoon to you. How much of a victory is this for the British government?
Good afternoon to you. I'd say it's more like part of a rearguard action, really. There is an enormous mismatch between the resources that are available to these oligarchs, to those who have profited from Putin's kleptocracy, and the arms of the British state that are supposed to fight financial crime. So in this case, what we've had today is a ruling that allows the government to continue imposing sanctions. What that doesn't equate to is effectively enforcing those sanctions to the point that they might have some serious effect in Russia. And beyond that, what it doesn't amount to is really ending or even challenging the status of London as the world's hub for dirty money.
OK, we'll ask you more about that in a moment. But can we just have more on this man and his links to Abramovich? And presumably Shvidler benefited because he was linked to a man who was very closely linked to Putin, correct?
Well, we all keep using this word linked, and this is the difficulty with sanctions. Shvidler's arguing that this is an infringement on his freedoms. In fact, one of the dissenting view among the judges agreed with him. And this is very murky territory. It's absolutely true that there is a kind of coterie of corrupt oligarchs who have this parasitic relationship with the Russian state that have grown very, very, very rich and support Putin's monstrous regime in doing so. But at the same time, sanctions are not imposed by courts, right? Sanctions are imposed by politicians ultimately. This isn't the Serious Fraud Office or the National Crime Agency or even the intelligence agencies trying to build a case that is ultimately put before a jury and a judge. This is what a government says someone has done wrong. And this is ultimately the problem with sanctions, right? That no one's really testing the facts underlying them.
So here we are then. The court has ruled 4-1 in favour of the sanctions continuing. But effectively, you're saying the sanctions, they don't do anything, they don't change anything, and they certainly don't impact on the thinking of President Putin.
Well, I mean, I've reported from Ukraine, and at the front line there, where Putin's drones and missiles and bombs are making life a living hell. I think people will say to you, look, if you can do sanctions, do anything you can, and it is the case that sanctions make life a bit harder for those that they're imposed upon, to the extent that they work. But it's also true that the UK isn't really doing very much to punish people who evade these sanctions, right? Typically, the worst you might expect to get is a kind of warning letter if you are someone who's subject to sanctions, or someone who's done business with someone who's subject to sanctions, or one of the many massive law firms and so on who have worked for these oligarchs and other cronies over the years. So it would be very hard to make the case that these sanctions are really biting.
So the Londongrad and the notion that this city, the city we are broadcasting from now, is awash with dirty money. How would we know, the citizens of London who go about our business, buying things, doing things, how would we know?
Well, it's the whole point of it is that it's made to look legit. This is what money laundering is. It's laundered, right? It's washed. So, but there are in fact tours of some of the more salubrious parts of London, where you can be shown the huge properties that are owned by former ministers from this or that ex-Soviet republic, or this or that relative of a let's say a Middle Eastern despot. That property is all around us. Then you might go to an art gallery, and you might ask the question about where is the money coming from that's flooding into the art market. You might take a train out of London and go to one of the old private schools. And you might ask, where are the funds coming for this influx of kids, of politicians and other business people from, let's say, the former Soviet Union? You might even go to Westminster and ask the treasurers of the main political parties what checks they do on the enormous political donations that come into our political parties, Conservatives, Labour, all of them really, and that shape our democracy, but are made by people who made their fortunes in these kleptocracies. This money is everywhere. Some of it is invisible, and some of it we just turn a blind eye to.
And we turn a blind eye to it because in some ways it suits us to have it. And if we don't have it, someone else might get hold of it. I mean, is that the reasoning?
I think yes, I do absolutely see that point. I think part of it is absolutely we want to have it. I mean, in a way, the weakness of our financial crime law enforcement amounts to a big sign over the UK that says, look, we used to have an empire of our own. Now we want the fruits of other people's. We want the fruits of private empires. We want dirty money. But at the same time, it is important that there is at least a semblance of the rule of law, because that's what's attractive, right? If you're a Kazakh oligarch and you've made billions down the barrel of a gun, you actually quite like the fact that there's the rule of law and property rights in the UK, because it makes it harder for the next guy to steal your mine or whatever from you if you've listed it on the London Stock Exchange. So it's this delicate balance between turning a blind eye to dirty money and maintaining at least a whiff of the rule of law.
Well, China would take this money, would it?
Well, I'm sure anyone, I mean, who in the world turns down enormous sums of money? I think that the point is, would people want to park their money in China where there isn't really the rule of law? This is my point. What we're doing really is selling, commodifying our greatest asset, which is the rule of law. Because if you wanted to park a few tens of millions in a piece of property in, let's say, Shanghai, and you fell out of political favour, that would just be seized. In the UK, there are independent courts. And this is the irony of the situation. It is the rule of law that is being used to shield the world's despots and their cronies.
Yeah, so I mean, it is crazy.
Consequences.
Yeah,
It is absolutely crazy.
Illegally obtained money is protected by the rule of law in our democracy.
Yes, and it's beyond that, it's protected by a book recently called Cuckoo Land, which is partly about how the legal industry goes to work for those who get rich through crime, essentially the oligarchs and other big wielders of dirty money. You know, the criminal justice system in the UK, as you know, as we've all been reporting, is in a terrible state. It's a pitiful proportion of, let's say, rape trials are brought to charge and trial and conviction. But the bit that's working really well is the civil courts, where still today oligarchs who are under sanctions can get a license from the Treasury, and they seem to be doled out pretty liberally, to hire the finest legal minds in the UK, huge legal companies, and fight their divorces and commercial disputes and so on in those courts. So we continue to benefit, and our legal industry continues to benefit from a massively lucrative oligarch legal scene, if you like, while the rest of the rule of law withers.
I mean, I'm increasingly, my mind is thoroughly boggled by this, and presumably the government, could it do something about the legal companies which choose to represent these people? And if so, what could they do?
Well, I mean, I've done this. I and a lot of other investigative journalists. We've been to the High Court. We've been sued by oligarchs. We've tried to fight this fight. I think that ultimately, when it comes to your questions about the law firms themselves, I think when it comes to that, there has to be some financial penalty for law firms that bring abusive lawsuits against journalists. For example, the brilliant journalists at Bellingcat, there was an outrageous case where they were basically bled of money by a law firm acting for a Russian mercenary. But there are life-changing amounts of money to be made for lawyers who are prepared to act for these clients. And until the incentives change, until maybe you wouldn't be able to claim those fees if you were shown to have abused the system, then all the motivation is to keep doing it.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Tom Burgis, who's an investigative journalist, and he's written a number of books. Cuckoo Land is one. Kleptopia, How Dirty Money is Conquering the World is another.